For most of the city, this was Savannah's 188th St. Patrick's Day Parade. But for this group, it wasn't 188, it was 200. These men are the heirs of the men who started the whole thing off in 1812. The story of Savannah's Hibernians is coming up. Estimates range from 500,000 people to more than 1 million, with a dependable number probably about as elusive as a pot of gold. But what we do know is that the procession started as a private ceremony back in 1812 by a group with anything but a party in mind.
It's St. Patrick's Day in Savannah, all the boys are on parade.
The little celebration that has become Savannah's signature was born in 1824, the child of an organization called the Hibernian Society, which was itself born in 1812 and is just this week celebrating 200 years.
It's hard to believe that James Madison was president of this country when this society was formed.
But though Savannah's St. Patrick's Day fame has spread around the world, that is not the purpose for which the Hibernian Society was founded, nor was it the Irish Catholic celebration that defines it today.
They actually met for the first time on March 17th, 1812. Many of them in Savannah particularly were from Ulster in the north, and most of those were of Scotch ancestry, and most of them were Presbyterian.
Well, most of the members were Protestant, but they welcomed Catholics into the society, and because of that combination, I think that the religious intolerance that certain Catholic Irish experienced in the rest of the country did not happen in Savannah.
The promise of building canals and waterways, jobs brought the Irish to Savannah. But they were set upon by robber barons with no regard for even minimum working conditions.
Life had very little value. I mean, back there they were competing for jobs with the slave population, but the slave population had a value. You know, they were purchased, and to the owner they had a value. The Irish immigrants didn't have a value.
There was abuse going on by sort of described as unscrupulous ship owners. They had brought out to Savannah from Ireland a fairly good number of men only, Irish men, to work in Savannah. But when they got here, there wasn't any work for them.
And were being put upon by unscrupulous people or the circumstances of the times back in 1812. You know, after all, we were about to go to war with Britain, and times were tough, and Ireland had been suppressed after the failure of the Revolution of 1798, 1799. And it was a group of people who really believed in charity in the best sense of the word.
Walter Hartridge is a partner in the law firm Bowen Williams and Levy. His ancestor, Thomas Usher Pulaski Charlton, was also a lawyer and the first vice president of the Hibernians. Well, that puts Mr. Hartridge in a singular 200-year-old category.
As far as Jack Jogstetter and I can determine, at the moment, the only present-day member of the society who is descended from a founder.
The Hibernians were successful on behalf of the immigrant Irish. The robber barons were made to account for bleeding the defenseless newcomers to America.
Gentlemen, it is an honor to deliver the toast to the Lion of Scotland, to our Celtic brothers of St. Andrew, at tonight's gathering of our two distinguished societies.
The affection between the Scots and the Irish, which was born in that outstretched hand of 1812, is celebrated once a century, whether they need to or not. You see, the St. Andrew Society, founded in 1737, and the Hibernians, founded in 1812, just happened to be having their annual gatherings at the same time and place back in 1908. And it was then they determined to join the celebrations together. Not wanting to overstate the harmony between the tribes, the two organizations resolved to get together once a century, most recently in 2008. Minutes of the previous meeting were not read. On the evening of March 17th, the Hibernians celebrated their 200th anniversary with the traditional banquet and fanfare. President Billy Kehoe presided over the affair, which included one of the great Irish voices Savannah has seen, Jim McLaughlin. Jim was accompanied by the First Lady of the city's Catholic community, Mrs. Patty Schreck. Mrs. Schreck has been at the organ for 44 years of Hibernian banquets and has decided that this year will be her last. The gathering honored her contributions and her character with the greatest ovation of the entire evening. Responding to the toast the day we celebrate was the Irish Minister of Development, Michael McNulty, who last spoke at a Hibernian banquet 42 years ago.
I was driving in one of these open cars with Éireann Go Bra written on the side of it, and really enjoying people shouting and waving. And then I noticed a guy in a car behind me throwing out packets of peanuts. And I said, what's going on here? I've got no peanuts to throw out. Anyway, after luncheon afterwards, I went up to this man and I said, look, I'm Michael McNulty. I've come all the way from Ireland. They didn't give me peanuts. Who are you? And he said, I'm Jimmy Carter. I'm running for governor.
Four-star Admiral William McCraven, the commander of U.S. Special Forces and the mastermind of the Navy SEAL operation that is credited with killing Osama bin Laden, responded to the toast to the United States of America.
Mr. President, like those first Irish Catholics that arrived in Savannah, we were tenacious, hardworking, and had a disdain for anything we couldn't drink or punch. Today, however, like the Irish, our fortunes have changed. The qualities that made the Special Operations Warriors outcasts, that toughness, that resilience, that restless attitude that drove us to drink and to fight, is now in great demand. In a world where chaos seems to reign supreme, the men of Special Operations have found their place, and today the force is more respected, more in demand than ever before. And the long, hard road that got us here was paved with the blood of Irish heroes. The father of modern-day Special Operations was Major General Wild Bill Donovan, who wore in the Medal of Honor fighting with the 69th Fighting Irish Regiment in World War I. Brigadier General William O. Darby established the modern Ranger units while stationed in Northern Ireland in World War II. Twice Darby was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest award for valor. Darby was also the first commander of the 1st Ranger Battalion stationed here in Savannah. Tonight, we are joined by Colonel Mike Foster, the battalion commander for the 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment stationed here at Hunter Army Airfield. Mike is one of the finest officers in the United States Army. His leadership in combat is unparalleled, and each and every night, his Rangers lead the way in Afghanistan and around the world. The 1st Battalion departs again next week for duty in Afghanistan. Mike, will you please stand?
Though the evening was as grand as befits a 200th anniversary, the mists of the past hung thick in the memories of the men in this room. 11 years after the Hibernians were founded, it was time to spread the gentle mirth and fellowship that they had found in each other. And so was born the celebration which rightly proclaims Savannah as the Ireland of this land.
In 1824 was the first year they invited the public to join the procession. So Bill Fogarty in his book says that was the beginning of the parade.
They said this year we invite the public to attend a procession at the Hibernian Society and an oration.
So the parade begins in 1824, and while it is a grand public celebration, it's the oration and March 17th gathering of just the Hibernians that occupies the hearts of the Irish and the friends of the Irish. Joe Coonahan, now there's an Irishman for you. He remembers taking his dad to the banquet.
I'd take him to the meetings. The meetings were right across the street over there, and he'd come out after the meeting and tell me, Joe, I can't tell you what went on at the meeting, but let me tell you this joke, or what Dan Sheen said about this joke, and what we had to eat.
At this time, I'd like to present, or actually return back to you, the key to the...
In the Jubilee of 2000, the great Cathedral of St. John the Baptist was renovated and restored to grandeur by Walter Murphy, whose company, Reeves Worrell Construction, was built to prominence by his dad, Buddy, or Big Murph, as Dan Sheehan used to call him. Buddy Murphy was a revered figure among the Hibernians, a past president. And when he passed away, the society found a way to honor him in a singular way.
My father always sat at the center table in front of the podium in basically the chair at 6 o'clock. And they found out my father died that morning, and they had gone in and tilted the chair up to the table that he always sat at, and nobody else sat at the table. And if you can picture that garden room in the Oglethorpe Club with 100 people at a meeting and one table empty with a chair tilted, that was a special moment.
To qualify to be at that banquet requires an affection for the Irish, a charitable heart, and patience. The number of Hibernians, 150, is set in stone. For someone to go in, someone else has to come off. The wait is generally measured in decades, and admission often follows a funeral.
Obviously, like most of us, put our names in way back when, and it takes forever to get into the society, about 25, 30 years, somewhere around there.
My father actually moved to honorary status, moved from active to honorary status, and I was the next on the list, so I moved into his slot. And his comment was, better that way than the other way.
However long the wait, people who are accepted into the society know that it's worth it.
I'm the fifth William Kehoe to have been a member of the society. And so my great-great-grandfather joined, and I think he became a member in 1881. So it's, you know, and all the same people that he knew and his sons knew and grandsons knew, I know.
Heroes are always welcome in the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Savannah, though future presidents sometimes have a little trouble.
The memories of past St. Patrick's Days in Savannah have left an indelible impression on my mind and on my heart. I remember how difficult it was for me to get an invitation to the Hibernian Society banquet.
One measure of the importance of the Hibernian Society is the quality of speakers who have been invited to address the banquet. President Jimmy Carter missed the parade in 1978, but was in fine form to regale the Irish and even offer a gentle dig at 1978 Grand Marshal Nick Kenny.
The first year that I was running for governor of Georgia with a great number of well-known and distinguished opponents, Toby Buttermer was in a car pretty much at the end of the line in the parade. He asked me to ride with him, and when I approached the starting point of the parade, a very irate minor official among the parade marshals came forward and said, "Young man, what right do you have to ride in the parade?" It's something that I'll never forget. His name was Nick Kenny. And I sincerely hope as president that you've not let him have anything to do with the parade since then.
For the centennial celebration of the Hibernians, President William Howard Taft got the nod, bringing his prestige and his tub with him to Savannah.
The sitting president, back in 1912, President Taft was a large man, and possibly the story goes he may have even brought his own bed on the train, and maybe even his own tub on the train.
Sweet just like chocolate candy, or like the honey from a bee. Oh, I'm just wild about Harry.
But of the presidents who have spoken to the Hibernians, none match the legend of plain-spoken, give-'em hell Harry Truman, who gave to young Savannahans the experience of a lifetime.
You can ask the former president anything you want about history. And I asked him, I said, well, when you had to fire MacArthur, he looked me straight in the eye and said, forgot he had a boss.
I was a brand new lawyer, hadn't been in the firm but a few months. And Mr. Boyden said to me, and his Irish broke, he said, would you like to meet the president, meaning President Truman? I said, yes, sir, I certainly would. And sure enough, about 2 minutes to 7, striding down the street, briskly, came President Truman, Mr. Boyden, and then Congressman Hagan. He said, come over, Walter, and he said, Mr. President, this is young Walter Hartridge. His people have always been good Democrats. And Truman says, that showed they had good sense. He was that way, plain speaking. And then Mr. Boyden said, he's working very hard. He said, keep it up, young man, you might get somewhere. And then he turned on his heel and walked over to the DeSoto Hilton. Harry Truman was plain speaking. What you see was what you got. I never have forgotten that. A great American. It was a great privilege to have met him.
One of President Truman's Marines was a past president of the Hibernians. General Jack McLaughlin served in World War II and was a prisoner of war in Korea. McLaughlin epitomized the love of country that beats in the hearts of the Hibernians.
Third, fourth, or so in the chain of command in the Marine Corps. Our members have served in every capacity in the armed forces since the War of 1812. The number of Irish names in the Marine Corps is amazing. So these guys know how to fight. It comes naturally.
But it came just as naturally to the Hibernians to reach out their hands to the people of Newark following the attacks on America.
My second meeting as president was on September the 12th, 2001. It was a night after the 9/11 tragedy. And I'd just like to say that the society responded immediately.
Brother, standing shoulder to shoulder as one, as force or as friend. That has been the sustaining feature of the Hibernians for 200 years. The streets that hold those bands also held a band of 44 men who marched from the Colonial Cemetery in 1812 to Independent Presbyterian Church on March 17th, an event that eventually gave rise to the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Time now on the 200th anniversary to consider the organization, its purpose, its duty, and what it has meant to these men who are the Hibernians.
The one thread maybe that goes through it, emphasis being charity and engendering good fellowship among descendants of etc. And I think that's not overstating it.
It's more than just walking down the street and celebrating. It's remembering who got us here. You know, that's important.
So many of our Hibernian members have been leaders in this country and this city of Savannah in law, business, medicine.
Now that's the genius of Savannah. It's been part of our nation's history since it was founded. And this society plays an integral part in all of that.
I guess it's a true camaraderie that is hard to find, and here you find it without even looking for it.
It's a very distinguished organization with a bunch of distinguished gentlemen who still understand that their purpose in life is to help those who really can't help themselves.
May the day we celebrate still mean as much 200 years from now as it does to us today.
Hear, hear.
Most Reverend Bishops, Reverend Monsignori, Right Reverend and Reverend Fathers, members and guests, tonight we have over 850 gentlemen with us as we celebrate our 200th annual dinner. As I look around, I'm almost left speechless. Well, almost. Welcome to everyone. I am William John Kehoe III, 74th President of the Hibernian Society of Savannah. My fellow Hibernians and guests, tonight we celebrate the 200th anniversary of the founding of the Hibernian Society of Savannah. When the shadows of war were overspreading this country, preparatory to its struggles with England in 1812, and when America was just beginning to readjust herself from the conditions into which she was thrown by the War of the Revolution, there was organized in the city of Savannah the Hibernian Society, with a legend modeled after that of the grand old colony of Georgia, not for ourselves but for others. It was then that John Cumming, our founder and first president, led a small procession of Irishmen on March 17, 1812, from near Colonial Cemetery to the Independent Presbyterian Church on Bull Street. Since then, our society has been an integral part of the life and the history of our great city of Savannah. Throughout our nation's history, our members have served in every noble field of endeavor. Our members through the past 2 centuries have become distinguished in the clergy, in the professions of law and medicine, in business, education, athletics, and the military. Hibernians have fought in every war, in every conflict, from 1812 to our most current conflict 200 years later in Afghanistan. We have always defended our nation with valor and fidelity. From our beginning, for the past 2 centuries, the most fundamental theme of our Hibernian Society has been the obligation and the practice of charity, the greatest of virtues. In the spirit of St. Patrick, our patron saint, we have aided our fellow citizens of Savannah in times of distress and need, regardless of their beliefs, race, or gender. We now solemnly pledge our firm resolve to continue this sacred theme into the 3rd century of service. Everyone is standing. It says please stand, but everyone standing, please raise a glass. And so, my brothers, I humbly offer a toast to you today in honor of our illustrious Hibernian Brotherhood, to our thousands of members since our birth on St. Patrick's Day 200 years ago, to those who were, to those who are, to those who will be. May we continue to serve our great city of Savannah, our state of Georgia, our United States of America, and all people as have brothers, our brothers in the past, and as of those of us to come in the future. May God continue always to hold our noble Hibernian Society of Savannah in the palm of his hand. Hear, hear. Hear. Please remain standing.
Let us pray. Lord of all nations and all peoples, we rejoice today in a special servant of yours, St. Patrick. Irish or not, Catholic or not, we all dance a gleeful jig on this his joyous feast day. Lord of bishops, bakers, and bartenders, we thank you for sprinkling saints among us like Holy Patrick, Bishop of Ireland. His green feast day gives us all a chance to wear the green of spring and life. Bless the people and the Isle of Ireland, especially during these difficult times. Giver of all good things, as we gather for this momentous banquet and 200th anniversary, We give thanks that we are again permitted to gather to share this meal. May our friendships be strengthened and our lives be broadened. We give you thanks for this food. Bless those who grew it, those who harvested it, those who brought it to us, those who prepared it for us, and those who will serve it to us. We ask this in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. has been the musical director and the organist at the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist for 66 years. 7 years, and she still leads the alumni choir. And Mrs. Streck has entertained Hibernians for 44 years.
It is with great pleasure that I present to you Mr. Michael J. McNulty to respond to the toast, the day we celebrate.
Distinguished guests, members, Reverend bishops, clergymen, friends, thank you for your welcome. It hardly seems 42 years ago since I stood not on this, wide gathering, but in a smaller hall in Savannah, 1970. I was brought there, as Tom has just said, by a great, great treasure person of mine, William Keogh. And I think of him obviously tonight. And I think of him bringing me here, what he has done for me in helping me develop a career of my own. The only thing that I don't like to remember him too much about was, you won't believe this, he said, "Michael, I want you to enjoy yourself, and I know you're going to speak well, but you're not going to have a drink either the day before or the night before you're going to have a speech." And I said to myself, you know, you can't tell an Irishman to do that. I said afterwards to his son, Billy, who's here, I said, "Billy, why was this?" Well, he said, "Daddy was afraid that if you had too much drink before your speech to the Hibernian Society, you'd screw up your speech, and Daddy would have to pay the check for your airfare back to the Hibernian Society." You know, 42 years ago, I used the words of St. Patrick. "I will arise today, God's might to uphold me, God's wisdom to guide me, God's ear to listen to me." I'm slightly worried about God listening. I feel the more appropriate words would be the words of William Howard Taft, 100 years ago, who said, "Neither orator or poet am I, but I'm glad to be here and have my say." And I would agree with that. I think about the parade itself. 42 years ago, I was driving in one of these open cars with Aaron Grubbraw written on the side of it, really enjoying people shouting and waving. And then I noticed a guy in a car behind me throwing out packets of peanuts. And I said, "What's going on here? I've got no peanuts to throw out." Anyway, after luncheon afterwards, I went up to this man and I said, "Look, I'm Michael McNulty. I've come all the way from Ireland. They didn't give me peanuts. Who are you?" And he said, "I'm Jimmy Carter. I'm running for governor." Billy Keogh, Bill Keogh Sr.'s and son and your president's father also put a little bit of the Keogh clippers on me and say, "Michael, I don't want you to speak gloom and doom about Europe at this dinner tonight." Why not? 42 years ago, when I was here, Ireland was weak, growing economy. 5 years ago, in 2007, we were the second strongest economy in Europe, second ahead of Germany, France, and all the others per head of population. Now, we've gone from boom to bust. But as we say in Ireland, things are desperate, but not serious. The Irish are also, apart from losing to run themselves, living longer and even marrying later. The story about Paddy in the bar with his friends, and the friend said to him, "Paddy, you know Mary that you've been courting for a long time. Would you ever do the honest thing? Would you make an honest woman of her? Would you marry her?" "Well, I might." "Why don't you just marry her?" "Well, Mary's 18. "Oh, sure, she's still younger." "Well, listen, Paddy, would you ever go and marry the girl, for God's sake, a decent woman?" Anyway, Paddy the next day went and met Mary, and he said, "Mary, would you marry me?" And she said, "Yeah." Okay, and he came back, and the boys met him about 3 nights later. He said, "Did you go and see Mary?" "I did." "Did you ask her to marry you?" "I did." "And did you ask her to say yes?" "Well, I can't remember." Well, they said, "Would you, for God's sake, go and pick up the telephone and clear that, for God's sake, you can't leave a woman that way." So he picked up the telephone, Said, Mary, this is Paddy McGillicuddy, and here's my telephone number. He said, you remember the other night I was over and I asked you to marry me? I do. And he said, yes, I did. Well, listen, Paddy, you're a decent man. I've been trying to remember the name and telephone number of the fella I said yes to. God, he said, I've used terribly bad language on the golf course. Well, tell me, what happened? Well, I hit the ball straight down the middle. It was a par 3 hole. It was going straight for the green. Oh, what happened, said the priest? Well, it hit a bloody rabbit and went stone dead and stopped. And what happened then? Well, I used awful language, terrible language. Oh, right. So he said, what happened then? Well, I went in and I picked up, and I was about to pick up the ball, and a bloody eagle flew over, picked the ball in his mouth, flew over the green, and dropped it 1 foot from the hole. And the priest said, you missed the friggin' putt. The founding fathers of your great society found humanity for others, still practiced today. And Mr. President, I would say to you and your members, Patrick would be very proud of you. I believe we all have humanity within us. Sometimes we find it hard to reach, our humanity being backed and blocked by our greed. The Hibernian Society for 200 years has practiced humanity not only for the Irish, but for those in need, and in so doing, reminding us of gestures, even small, how we can help another person's life. Over the last 42 years, I've been privileged to meet some very famous people and experienced humanity gestures, a practice often forgotten in a world now encountering greed with resultant consequences for us all. I had the privilege of organizing President Reagan's visit to Ireland. A particular thing we wanted to do was bring him to his home village in Ballyporeen, County Tipperary. And he came, and I met him. And we brought him to a church, his church, for a surprise. The surprise was that we had found, 2 months before he came, the signatures of his great-great-grandfather and great-great-grandmother, both villagers from the same village. I was with him. We went up in the church, which was packed. Nancy was with him. And the parish priest opened the book. And this is what I saw. The president looking and crawling Nancy over and picking Nancy's hand figure and tracing them over. He said, look what they have found. And then I saw the President of the United States cry. And I said to myself, yes, it's okay for strong men to cry. The end of that story is about a year later, I was invited to the White House on Patrick's Day to meet the President again, and talking afterwards with Tip O'Neill, famous Irishman who was Speaker, I think at a time when Republicans and Democrats talked to each other. But we were talking about the President's visit, and Tip told me, he said, you probably know this, but he said, I'm a Democrat and I'm Speaker of the House, but he said, I never know when around about 5 o'clock most evenings of the week I get a call from the President and we exchange Irish stories. He said, the week after his visit to Ireland, the President called. He said, Tip, you there? Yeah, I am, Mr. President. Well, you know I've been in Ireland. Yes, Mr. President, yeah. Well, I tell you what. Do you know where I was? I was in my home village, and they found my great-grandparent and great-grandmother and father's signature. But do you know what, Tip? What, Mr. President? Do you know the name of the village? No. The name of the village is Ballyporeen. Oh. And do you know what that means in English? It means the village of small potatoes. And then he said, Tip, haven't we Irish come a long way? One of the main reasons we have peace today in Northern Ireland, in a critical week when the British Prime Minister, or Irish Prime Minister, and the leaders of the IRA of Sinn Féin were getting together. And I know for a fact that President Clinton was never off the phone, hour by hour, saying, you guys, you've got to get together and make peace. And they did. And a lot of people in Ireland say, yes, bringing people together, we've got to thank the people who made the peace, but we've also owed a debt of gratitude to President Clinton, who showed great humanity.
Thank you, Michael, for your remarks. Fellow Hibernians and distinguished guests of the Society, friends, happy St. Patrick's Day to you all. Thanks to Peter Muller and the Board of Stewards for this incredible anniversary banquet tonight. It has been wonderful. Tonight, Admiral Bill McRaven is a most worthy successor to these distinguished speakers of the past. There's a quote from Winston Churchill that says, "We sleep soundly in our beds at night because strong men stand ready in the night to do violence on those who would do us harm." Admiral McRaven is one of those strong men who stand watch in the night. His successes in combating terrorism are legendary in the DoD. Most of the things that our incredible Special Operations Forces do for all of us we'll never know about, we'll never hear about, we'll never read about. And that's the way they like it. That said, some military operations are harder to keep low profile than others. So, many of you may have read speculative reports in the media about some of the historic successes achieved by the Admiral and his team. He will not tell you about those tonight, I don't think. But collectively, they clearly establish him as our country's premier weapon against Al-Qaeda and international terrorism. Every American owes this superb SEAL warrior a great debt for helping to keep the country and the people that we love free from the random savagery of terrorist acts. He's a native of San Antonio. He went to the University of Texas on a track scholarship, graduating in 1977. He completed SEAL training in Class 95. He's commanded Navy SEALs at every level, platoon, team, and group. He's a thought leader and an innovator, as well as a man of action. While he was at the Naval Postgraduate School, he wrote what has become the definitive book on how to carry out successful special operations missions. He served at the White House as a counterterrorism advisor on the National Security Council. He's commanded the Special Operations Forces for NATO. He's commanded our country's primary counterterrorist organization and turned it into the most lethally effective organization of its type in history. He currently commands the U.S. Special Operations Command, a force of 66,000 strong with an annual budget of $10 billion. So for those of you not familiar with military structure, what this means is that every Green Beret in the Army, every SEAL in the Navy, every Ranger in the Army, every Special Operations Marine in the Corps, every Special Operations pilot in the Air Force and the Army, and an incredible array of talented men and women all work for Admiral McRaven. He was awarded the Texan of the Year for 2011, that's a huge honor. Was a finalist for Time Magazine's Man of the Year award last year. This is the public William McRaven. A few other things that you will not easily read in the media, but you should know about. In 2001, when the Twin Towers were attacked, he was recovering from a very severe injury sustained in a parachuting accident. This accident would have ended many careers, but the Admiral got himself well and came out ready to get into the fight. As we say in the SEAL community, he ran to the sound of the guns. Our country knows Admiral McRaven as the epitome of a special operations warrior, but the men and women who have had the honor of working for him know him as a friendly, humble person, a person who frequently reaches out to help his friends, his teammates, and everybody who works for him. For all of these reasons, he's held in the absolute highest esteem by the men and women of Special Operations. Admiral Bill McRaven is respected and trusted by our nation's leaders. He's feared by our nation's enemies, what few of them are left at this point in time. Gentlemen, please join me tonight in welcoming a great American, Admiral Bill McRaven.
Good evening, Mr. President, distinguished guests, gentlemen of the Hibernian Society. It is indeed an honor for me to be here tonight to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the Hibernian Society of Savannah. Savannah has always been extremely welcoming to the military. The leadership of the city and the people who they represent are unquestionably some of the most patriotic people in the country. And of course, what soldier wouldn't want to celebrate St. Paddy's Day marching through the streets of this wonderful city and finishing the day at Kevin Barry's with a cold Guinness stout in one hand and a warm Southern Belle in the other. In my years in the service, I have been to Savannah a number of times, but I have a confession to make. And this would be the right place to do it, I guess. I confess that I didn't truly know who the Hibernians were. My father-in-law, Robert Paul Brady, a fine Irish Catholic man from Dallas, was president of the Texas Area Hibernian Society. But between our shared love of Guinness, Irish whiskey, and a fine cigar, we rarely talked about life's more important things. So in preparation for tonight's event, I asked my military aide-de-camp to provide me some background on the Hibernian Society of Savannah. He did some magnificent, in-depth research and found the charter which incorporated the Hibernian Society of Savannah in 1812. He was quite proud of himself, and standing before me in my office, he read aloud the preamble of the charter. "Sir," he said, addressing me, "the Hibernian Society of the City of Savannah was formed to promote social and friendly harmony among indignant and exiled Irishmen." Well, I thought, indignant Irishmen. Well, I can see how the Irish would be angry and resentful, forced from their native land, persecuted for their religious beliefs, unable to tan well. But to have a fraternal society based on being mad at the world just didn't seem quite right. Of course, upon further examination, I realized that the aide had made a small mistake. The Irish in question weren't indignant, they were indigent. Impoverished, poor, and desperately in need of the kindness and compassion that only a fine society like the Hibernians could provide. We in the Special Operations community can certainly empathize with those Irish. Early in our history, we were also indigent and exiled, cast off from the bigger Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Marines, without a home and very little support from the big services. We fought hard to be recognized for our uniqueness, to be represented for our craft, to be respected for our craft. Like those first Irish Catholics that arrived in Savannah, we were tenacious, hardworking, and had a disdain for anything we couldn't drink or punch. Today, however, like the Irish, our fortunes have changed. The qualities that made the Special Operations Warriors outcasts, that toughness, that resilience, that restless attitude that drove us to drink and to fight, is now in great demand. In a world where chaos seems to reign supreme, the men of Special Operations have found their place. Today, the force is more respected, more in demand than ever before. And the long, hard road that got us here was paved with the blood of Irish heroes. The father of modern-day Special Operations was Major General Wild Bill Donovan, who wore the Medal of Honor fighting with the 69th Fighting Irish Regiment in World War I. Brigadier General William O. Darby established the modern Ranger units while stationed in Northern Ireland in World War II. Twice Darby was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest award for valor. Darby was also the first commander of the 1st Ranger Battalion stationed here in Savannah. Tonight, we are joined by Colonel Mike Foster, the battalion commander for the 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment stationed here at Hunter Army Airfield. Mike is one of the finest officers in the United States Army. His leadership in combat is unparalleled, and each and every night, his Rangers lead the way in Afghanistan and around the world. The 1st Battalion departs again next week for duty in Afghanistan. Mike, will you please stand? But the list of Irish heroes is even longer. Captain Roger Donlan, the 1st Medal of Honor recipient of the Vietnam War. Lieutenant Bob Carey, a SEAL Medal of Honor recipient from Vietnam. Petty Officer SEAL Mike Thornton, Medal of Honor recipient from Vietnam. Lieutenant Tom Norris, Navy SEAL Medal of Honor, Vietnam. And the gallantry continues today. Staff Sergeant Robert Miller, Medal of Honor for heroism above and beyond the call in Afghanistan. Colonel Mark Mitchell and Sergeant First Class Brendan O'Connor, the Distinguished Service Cross, Afghanistan. And one more noteworthy Irishman, Lieutenant Michael Patrick Murphy. Mike Murphy was a young SEAL officer from Pennsylvania. On June 28, 2005, Murphy was the officer in charge of a 4-man SEAL element in support of Operation Red Wing, tasked with finding a key al-Qaeda commander near Asadabad, Afghanistan. Shortly after his reconnaissance element inserted into the objective area, the SEALs were spotted by goat herders, and before long, their position was surrounded by a 50-man enemy force. The enemy was not only numerically superior, they had the high ground from which to engage the small SEAL element. An hour into the firefight, all 4 SEALs had been seriously wounded, and the only chance for survival was to call for reinforcements. Unfortunately, the steep terrain prevented them from making clear communications. Murphy realized that the only way to get out of the distress call was to climb to the high ground, where he could get a good radio signal. But to do so meant exposing himself to withering enemy fire. With complete disregard for his own life, Mike Murphy moved to high ground and made contact with the SEAL Quick Reaction Force at Bagram, Afghanistan. During the radio call, Mike was shot again, this time in the back. But while severely wounded, he still managed to return to his comrades before their position was overrun. One of the 4 SEALs, Petty Officer Marcus Luttrell, was blown off the ridgeline by a rocket-propelled grenade and eventually was rescued several days later. For his actions that day, Mike Murphy was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. But there is more to the story. For Mike's radio call made it through and brought the Quick Reaction Force. His fellow SEALs, who without hesitation, knowing their friends and fellow warriors were wounded and dying, boarded an MH-47 helicopter crewed by the legendary Night Stalker aviators of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. And together, the SEALs and the Night Stalkers flew to Mike's last known destination. As the helicopter approached the ridgeline, an enemy soldier, armed with an RPG, shot down the aircraft, killing all 16 men aboard. There were a lot of Irishmen on the helo that day. Irishmen with names like Jacques Fontaine, Morales, Schurkenbach, Sue, Christensen, and Reich. And in this war, I have been privileged to serve with some of the finest Irishmen I know. Men like General David Petraeus, General Ray Odierno, General Ricardo Sanchez, and Secretary Leon Panetta. You see, if this war has taught us anything, it is that there's a little bit of Irish in all of us. Because behind every fight to free the oppressed, there's an Irishman. Behind every struggle to right the great injustices of the world, there is an Irishman. Behind every attempt to overthrow tyrants who hold power unearned, there is an Irishman. Everywhere people lift up the downtrodden, comfort the poor of spirit, and tend to the broken hearts, there will be an Irishman. You see, when we arrived in this great land, it wasn't the quality of our whiskey or the stoutness of our ale or the melody of our songs that made a difference. It was the soul of the Irishman that changed America. It was our belief that never again would men be persecuted for their religion. Never again should families be driven from their homes. Never again should those of lesser fortune be treated unequally in the eyes of the law. These beliefs, these virtues, these enduring principles of life are what make people Irish. It has been said that you may assimilate some races, but you can't assimilate the Irishman. He assimilates you, and even if you have not a drop of Irish blood in your veins, you begin to believe firmly that you do. Today, every American firmly believes that they have some Irish blood in their veins. As you celebrate the 200th anniversary of this magnificent society, it is right that you reflect on your past accomplishments, that you recognize the many contributions of those who have gone before you and made Savannah and the nation a better place to live. But I would also encourage you to look forward to the future. For in this time in history, when there are wars and rumors of wars, when despots rule with heavy hands, when poverty, disease, and moral deprivation is rampant, the world is in great need of what the Irish have to offer. The world needs our fighting spirit. They need our sense of outrage at the injustices. They need our willingness to take up a cause and make it right. They need our compassion for the weak and unfortunate souls that struggle with life's daily challenges. Above all, they need our unquenchable hope. They need to see us smile in the midst of despair because we believe in tomorrow. They need to see us laugh in the face of danger because we know there is life after death. They need to see us plan for a long, happy future because we know that our nation is strong and our spirit indomitable. As long as Irishmen roam the world, there will be laughter, there will be song, there will be drink, and there will be men to take up arms and fight for all that is good and just. On your 200th anniversary, I commend you for the great works you have done and for the many great works to come. Thank you very much.
Chairman Ted Havlin and committee members Joe Cunahan and Jack Yorkstetter for a beautiful commemorative program. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank Bobby Murphy III. Walter has been a terrific help to me, and with his past experience as a past president and all, this all couldn't have come off without the superior help, and really appreciate it, Walter. Thank you. And to all the other committee chairmen and their members, thank you for an outstanding job tonight and throughout the bicentennial year. I wish to express my appreciation for having allowed me the honor, the privilege for serving as your 74th president on this momentous 200th anniversary year. And before moving on to the business at today's annual meeting, I'd like to offer one last toast, 200 years and counting, written by our poet laureate, Mr. Ed T. Brennan. And unfortunately, Mr. Brennan cannot be with us tonight as he's recovering from a recent surgery, but he is doing well. Driven from our ancestral home by relentless tyranny, their forebears sought a better life in this land across the sea. They bonded together as brothers, and to those who later came, they offered the hand of friendship and aid in Hibernia's name. This beautiful city they came to love, and the city loved them back. And so 100 years passed by, then 100 more after that. A toast to the Reverend Society on this its 200th year. May its individuals endure forever, and I with fraternal good cheer. 200 years, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, gentlemen, especially on our 200th anniversary. I'm sure that my parents and my Irish ancestors are smiling down from heaven right now. I wish they could be here to enjoy this moment with me. I owe many thanks to our past presidents for their good example and mentoring, and would like to thank the nominating committee for my nomination and the society members for giving me this great honor. Unlike many past presidents who have the legacy of fathers and grandfathers, in some cases great-grandfathers, being society members and past presidents before them, I'm the first person in my family to be a member of the Hibernian Society, and now president of the society. Hopefully in the future, my son, grandsons, nephews, and other family members will be elected to the society and enjoy all the benefits of membership and carry on the legacy of the Brigham family for many years in the future. My Irish heritage is very important to me, and I have always taken pride in being Irish and being a member of the Hibernian Society. My family and I look forward to celebrating St. Patrick's Day every year. As president, I intend to maintain the heritage and traditions of the society and to advance our primary goals of charity, maintaining a filial attachment for Ireland, and the cultivation of good fellowship. Thanks again for this honor and privilege, and I'll do my best to exceed your expectations. Thank you. Dr. Paul Jorgensen, would you please come to the podium to receive your Vice President's badge?
Thank you, gentlemen.
President Kehoe for the outstanding, wonderful job he did tonight, and for the last year has been president of the Hibernian Society. So, hear, hear. And past President Kehoe, if you come to the podium, I've got your past president's badge.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The benediction tonight will be given by Reverend Steve Williams. Reverend Williams.
Thank you. I have to say to the Admiral, that was a fine speech, an inspiring sermon. I'm out late tonight. I have an open pulpit tomorrow morning for you. I'm deeply honored to offer the benediction tonight, especially on this, the 200th anniversary of the Society. Most every year at this time, maybe you're like me, I'd watch again that great film, The Quiet Man. And there are a lot of memorable scenes, but the one I referenced tonight is when Michaeline Flynn looks in at the cottage of the newlyweds and sees the broken door, the collapsed bed, and says, impetuous and then Homeric. And tonight was Homeric, that worthy of an epic poem by Homer. Now there are lots of Irish blessings. Some are playful, others are profound. But tonight I turn to St. Paul, who was not Irish, but I think he was good enough. He was impressive enough to be Irish, right? And Paul, addressing the Christians in Corinth, concludes the 15th chapter of his first letter this way. And why don't we stand? with these stirring words. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your work is not in vain. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be with you now and always. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is
you.
William Kehoe, and I have this Walter Murphy and the other members and officers of the Bicentennial Committee of the Hibernian Society, and we're ready to sing. All right? I'm sorry you rearranged your agenda. I think we should have come before.
Marks the 200th anniversary of the founding of the Hibernian Society of Savannah, Georgia. Now, therefore, I, Edna Branch Jackson, Mayor of the City of Savannah, do hereby recognize and celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Hibernian Society of Savannah, Georgia, and encourage local citizens to honor their vital contributions to our community. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. You don't need to come down. I could come up.
That's all right. Thank you so much for all that you do here in our city. And we're just very pleased to present this to you.
Thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
We're very honored that the city would offer us this proclamation. Thank you, Mary
Thank you
Ellen.
so much.
Thank you, council members.
Thank you
very much.